All right, welcome on to a many time guest of the program. You wrote a great article last playoffs about Tyrese Halliburton and getting through some of the mental struggles that he had early on in the season. But he is now a newly minted San Antonian. Hello, Jared Weiss. How are you, man?
San Antonian, I haven't heard that yet. I feel minted now.
It's sort of like minted is a very sort of old westy like Southwest term, right? So
Well,
it's a bunch.
yeehaw, as I'm obligated to say at the top of every podcast filmed in Texas. Yeehaw, my friend.
Yeah, well, we're gonna dive right into it here. You've moved down to cover the Spurs primarily now for the Athletic, which has got to be really exciting. Already wrote a must-read article about Victor Wembanyama and his off-season training and basically how he is looking to come in and destroy the league after an involuntarily truncated season a year ago. So let's just start right there. What is the state of Victor Wembanyama heading into year 3?
It's unclear. It's somewhere between he's taken a nice step and the league is ruined. It really could go either way at this point. He is such a different player already. And I think if there's one thing I've picked up on early here, it's that you can't really put labels or expectations on Victor. He is just too he's one of a kind. And I know we've said that. Size-wise one of a kind, or at least size plus dynamics one of a kind, but his mentality is the part that really stands out. Like, this guy is so open-minded, curious, driven, confident. He does an amazing job of having a pretty bold ego without coming across like an asshole. Like, he somehow is towing that line very effectively. He's the complete package. It's amazing to see up close. He is the complete package in the way that he carries himself. And that's a big part of why he is on the track that he's on, where he's, based on what I've seen so far, I totally see, he's on a similar track to LeBron when LeBron got to the league, and I could see him getting to a similar place. And this season, we've seen him in the preseason. He started playing point guard, so he was a 7-foot, I'm going to say 6, but 5 at the very least point guard, even though he's listed as 7'4". Then he kind of shifted to wing. He plays every position. They call him a forward when they introduce him. He doesn't want to be called a center. And it makes sense because when you watch him on offense, he's playing every position right now.
Yeah, the things that have stuck out to me about Victor in the preseason is that he's stronger. He's now starting to take advantage of the fact that you can do whatever you want with your off arm in this league, which, again, that's no shade on him. I've said this many times. That should be a rule change, but if it's going to be legal, you should just he definitely should take advantage of it. And so now he's able to actually knock guys backwards. And if he knocks somebody backwards, it's just a dunk from the dotted line. Like he's so I think the biggest issue that I had with his offensive game was both how the team was using him and that he just wasn't getting to the basket enough. He was taking a lot of threes. You know, the question of like what percentage he's going to shoot on threes is interesting. He was awesome after a rough start last year. So that's, I think, yeah, it really is the sky's the limit. And like his passing, like he's going to be working these big to big lineups now with Luke Cornett. They're going to be impossible to score on. So I think it's really going to be fascinating to see what he can do. And it may just be where he's going to have to just get double teamed all the time. We'll talk about whether the Spurs can punish that or not very shortly. But I've been impressed by what I've seen. And I certainly, he to me was a top 5. He was a number 5 in MVP to me when he went down. And I don't, as long as he's healthy, I think he's going to be at that level again this year, if not better.
He's definitely going to be better this year. So, based on the way he's been playing, we could really see him averaging like 30 points, 6 assists, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks. Like his numbers might be so good that people have to put him in the top 3 anyway. And he's going to put up insane numbers, I'm sure. The thing that really caught my eye is I wrote about this on Friday in The Athletic. He is taking twice as many free throws a game as threes a game right now. And last year it was like...
That's really exciting.
It's a complete opposite of what it was last year. Last year he was chucking like 9 threes a game. And it was, I think, like 8th or 9th in volume last season per game. He was taking as many threes as Donovan Mitchell. And that's because he did it. I think one, he was trying to develop his shot because he figured once I get people to respect me from deep, then that opens up the floor for me. And when you open up the floor for a 7'5" guy, it makes things a little, makes things kind of impossible to defend. So part of it was just he was trying to change the way the court looks for him. And now that he's done that and he has that space because people have to respect his shot, now he's up faking on closeouts and he's driving right past them. And it takes him one dribble and he's already at the restricted line. Like he's already there. So he's learning how to pass off of that. And we're seeing the assists piling up. Now, the problem is he's throwing behind the back passes and bad passes all the time. I think he's just having fun and he's experimenting, and we'll probably see him not making most of those plays when the regular season comes. So his turnover rate has been through the roof. But I think the kind of the silly turnovers will go away. The big question is, can he actually dribble through traffic against real NBA defenses? Because he's already having trouble in the preseason with like good guards that can get up underneath him and they can take the ball from him, things of that nature. But I think it's going to be kind of a bit of like a learning curve for him this year, knowing how to handle like actual ball pressure as a wing. But he'll probably be able to figure that out.
Well, and then like he's just going to be the defensive player of the year if he's healthy. I mean, that's again, like, I am guilty myself of forgetting just how ridiculous he was last year, and just going back and looking at what I thought of him at the time was kind of eye-opening as I was preparing for this, to just be like, yeah, like I had him as defensive player of the year and a top 5 MVP candidate, and like he's probably going to be better this year. He's stronger. Like I had all my like because it's so easy to forget that there are some frustrations with him, as you noted. He's still always trying to explore the studio space. That may end up really helping him in the end. He doesn't want to have limits put on him, and I think the Spurs have done a pretty decent job of that. But I'm also like, yeah, maybe you could roll the basket every once in a while too, right? Or he does miss assignments. He does get tired. Although some of the games I saw where that was the case was when he already probably was dealing with the DVT, and so I give him a pass for those. But I mean, like, he just was so far above everyone else in defensive player of the year last year. And, the Spurs were like 9 points per 100 better when he was on the floor defensively. So it's really going to be exciting how he does it and what skills he adds. But he is definitely he's on track to be one of the all-time greats. Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, you watch on defense, teams, we're seeing in the preseason, teams basically, their only hope is to either get wide open threes or to pull him. They have to basically run like a 3-man dummy action on one side just to get him not paying attention to the backside somehow, so they can somehow get somebody to drive while he's turning around. And you'll see most layups that happen at the rim while he's out there, it's usually him turning around and just seeing, I'm a little too late to come over and block it. But he's still going to do it 4 times a game probably anyway. But like teams can't really run action straight at him. It just doesn't work. I'm curious to see if anybody can like Gortat him, if you can get like a good center that can kind of just stop him in the middle of the paint on a roll, and then you can get to the lane that way. But most like great scorers in the NBA, when they're going at a really great center and defense, they'll find a way to kind of snake around him and get to the other side of the rim. It doesn't work. It like almost never works. He can let people go by him and then just catch them from behind. And we've seen it so many times. When he closes out kind of short because nobody's going to shoot over him anyway. And then he kind of lets them go through, but he stays pretty much on their inside leverage as they drive. And then the play's over from there. They have to get rid of it. There's just so many things that he can do that the smarter he gets with his positioning, the less energy he has to expend and the more plays that he takes away. Because the number one issue for him at this point is just stamina. It's just load management over the course of the year and stamina, because he's in amazing shape for his size, but he still has trouble with his wind getting up and down the floor at times. And we saw last season, there were lots of games where he kind of wore down a little bit. And so maybe it was the DVT, but it probably is also, I think this is something that has been an issue for him for a long time, just because it is for anybody who's 7'5", 7'6". So that's a big question, is how much can he load manage throughout a game to make himself sustainable. And that's why, as much as you want to see him lean into being the world's tallest point guard, you don't want him doing that too much, because then by the fourth quarter, he's going to run out of steam. And of course, you don't want him getting tired too much anyway, just because then it opens up more injury risk. And as much as he takes care of his body to avoid like orthopedic injuries, exhaustion, we know this, we've heard this a million times now, players are more tired these days, and it leads to more injuries these days. And you got to do whatever you can to prevent this guy from getting injured.
Let's turn now to some of the newcomers. Dylan Harper, drafted number 2 overall. I was kind of depressed when I heard about his thumb injury, but he's made it back in the middle of camp. What are we seeing from him so far? What are the expectations for him this season?
It was funny. My first story I was planning on doing when I got the Spurs job was I was going to go out to San Antonio and sit down with him. And then I found out it's like, bad news. It's not going to happen because he's actually having thumb surgery tomorrow. And so what was, I think, the pleasant surprise is when I found out about the surgery and put it out there, the thinking was hopefully he'll be back at some point during the first week of the season. He only missed like a week of preseason. He's already back, and he already looks really impressive. And I thought he sucked at Summer League. He just looked like he had the yips. He looked very lost out there. He couldn't get a feel for where his pockets were to drive. He was making lots of mistakes. And all of that's gone. Like that game he had in Indy where he almost had a double-double, he looked so good running point. Him and Luke Cornett already have a really good feel for how to run pick and roll out in the open space. It's funny, his best play of the evening, I thought, was where he kind of reset a couple times on that Cornett pick and roll. And then he got to the rim for a floater, and he took a floater and he missed it. He didn't notice Wemby was standing wide open underneath the rim. So it's like, he doesn't even have a real feel for how this team works at this point. If Wemby is able to put himself in front of the rim, like, you just got to give it to him and let Wemby just turn around and throw it in the hoop. So there's all sorts of easy stuff that he doesn't even really have a feel for where that is yet. So I think he's going to turn into a really good point guard over these next couple of years. He's already showing enough that I think that, obviously Fox and Castle are going to start, and he's probably going to come off the bench to start the season. But, well, obviously Fox isn't going to be ready for opening night, so maybe he'll start on opening night. But I wouldn't be shocked if Harper works his way into at least main six-man status, if not somehow being a starter later as the season goes on. And certainly by next year, it's a possibility because he just already looks that composed.
He's just a basketball player. And I thought also he looked very explosive on some of the finishes. Like he's can be dominating getting to the basket. To me, it's just what happens outside of 10 feet. With his game, I think he's capable taking, corner threes, spot ups. He's not like a non-shooter in the sense that he's afraid to take them, but also just, his release point is something that I've harped on this show, and I don't need to get into it. That it's kind of low. And
Harpered on.
Yes,
thank you. Continue.
I've missed having you on. So
I missed it too.
Yeah, and I think defensively, he's just an NBA level athlete, strength. I actually, controversial opinion, I think he's going to be better than Castle this year as an offensive player. Wow. That's interesting. Just because they don't have shooting, so they're going to need passing. I think he's just going to be a better, more composed passer. But yeah, I mean, I think let's move on to Castle actually as well. Sure. So it seems like he's going to start at the 2 next to Fox, in your opinion. And the big thing I want to focus on here, and we can get into the individual aspects of his game, but just what has been the discussion of just how these 3 guards are going to fit together, Fox, Castle, and Harper, or 2 of them at once, if it's not all 3 of them.
I mean, you're not going to do all 3 of these guys. It's just, you could. I don't know if, I haven't seen much evidence yet that it's a lineup that they're going to try to do, but because Fox hasn't played in the preseason, he's not going to be ready for opening night. I don't know how that's going to work, but you in theory could do 3 of those guards just kind of cutting around, running in circles around Wemby, playing out of the high post or playing out up on the slot. And you could see if you can make it happen. Like, it is something that they should try it just because it'll be fun to watch.
I mean, all those guys have at least some defensive potential. I think Castle can guard a lot of threes, but I mean, hilariously, by playing more guards, you're probably actually lighter on shooting.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is none of those guys are reliable 3-point shooters. Except I think Fox's 3-point shot is pretty solid, or solid enough for a guy who's like a non-shooting point guard necessarily. So that could happen, but you're going to see basically combinations of the two of them. And what's good is like you can play two of those guys pretty easily. And I mean, Castle went 2 for 4 in his first game of the preseason, so who knows? Maybe he actually shoots decently this year. But like, Castle, I don't think Harper's going to be better offensively this year, just because I think Castle's finishing ability in the paint is just going to be so much better. Like Harper, when he has a look at the rim, he can get up there and attack the rim really well. But his floater game and all that kind of stuff, I think he's going to struggle with that early on. While Castle, I think, has demonstrated that he can kind of weave his way through the paint more effectively. So that's why I think Castle will continue to be the starting 2 this entire time. But like, I don't really see how they can long-term do all 3 of those guys, unless there's like a real growth in Castle's shooting ability. I just don't see how they're going to make that work. It doesn't really fit together. And so that's why this is a problem they can solve 2 years from now. It doesn't even need to be solved next year. But, unless one of those guys is going to have a pretty incredible jump in their shooting ability, it's probably not going to work really, really long-term. And as a rookie, it's easy for Harper to come off the bench, but Harper's probably going to be good enough that you want him playing 36 minutes a night starting year 2. So that's when it gets really interesting. I mean, we'll see how much Castle evolves, but Castle kind of seems like the ideal Spurs 6-man. He kind of seems like he fits that Manu mold very well. Although, frankly, Harper's been playing like Manu a lot lately as well. So, it's possible that they just move Castle to the bench and he accepts that and he becomes the 6-man of the year every single year. That's very possible. But for now, I don't really see a way to keep all these guys happy, giving them the full role that they're all worthy of long term.
And what do they say about that when it comes up?
Hasn't really come up yet because Fox hasn't been out there yet. But I think they don't seem to be hiding from the reality that these are 3 guys that have a lot of redundancies of their game, and they're missing like the most important element to be able to fit anywhere, which is shooting ability. Like none of them are shooting at a high clip right now. I mean, I've heard a few people mention around the team optimism that Castle's shot is going to take a step forward this year. And actually, it was funny. I was just watching Jeremy Sohan getting shots up at the facility, and his shot looks a lot better now. And he was a guy who was like a complete non-shooter these last couple of years, and his shot actually looked decent. So we'll see how he does this year. But the Spurs' whole thing is basically, can we get more than 2 shooters on the floor around Victor at a time? Because it's hard for them to put together lineups that utilize their best players and have at least 3 shooters out there.
Yeah, we haven't seen Fox at all in preseason. Last year, I was disappointed in how they used him. I can't remember the number, but it was just a comically low number of plays where shots were being created out of actions between him and Wembanyama. And so have there been any discussion of just how he's integrating into the group? Maybe not because he's been out, but I'm interested to know kind of what the feeling is about Fox, who they obviously made a big investment in, both trade-wise and then, of course, with the extension.
Now, he's kind of been lingering in the back because he hasn't been out there. And that's the funny thing with the Spurs is there's so many guys that are early in their development. So there's so many guys we're questioning about how does it work with Castle and Harper. We haven't even talked about Devin Vassell, who at this point of his career, like he just said earlier today that he actually feels like really healthy for the first time in a long time, which, we've heard that before from a lot of players.
Because he was out with that knee surgery at the start of last year, right?
Yeah, he's had so many, but he said like my knees feel great. So that's a really important thing with him. There's so many other guys who are trying to get a pulse on that Fox has kind of been an afterthought because he's not playing yet. So that hasn't really come up so far. But it's really interesting is, in a vacuum, the most obvious thing for this team on the court is a Fox Wemby high pick and roll, right? Like Fox is a lightning bolt getting down the floor. If he can get around the initial coverage and Wemby can go wherever he wants, the defense is going to panic. And we didn't get to see much of that, as you were saying. Like, we didn't get to see much of that last season. They only had a few games together, and Wemby was not feeling well, obviously, and then Fox got hurt, and he was brand new there, and that team was in kind of a weird transition because it was Mitch taking over for Pop. And now they've had a whole summer. They bring in Sean Sweeney and Corliss Williamson on their staff to give them some good veteran leadership. And like they could have a much more robust and composed team that is showing a lot more interesting stuff than they showed last year. So it's very possible that we just see a lot of that just kind of wide open spread pick and roll for Fox and Wemby. But I know their main philosophy has been, Sean Sweeney's in here to try to turn them into a top 5 defense. Like that's what they really want. Wemby had a really good quote at Media Day. He said, defense is absolutely non-negotiable here. That's our main thing. I don't care who you are. I don't know if he said including himself, but I don't think we need to really ask much about that for Wemby. But like, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're not defending, you're not playing on this team. And that's important to have from your star player. And so, this team out and running and that's also where you could potentially see a lineup of the 3 guards work, is if this team is just pressing really hard, getting ultra aggressive with their ball pressure and getting lots of leakouts, and you've got 3, high-level point guards out there, you can do a lot of amazing stuff, whether it's fast break or just flowing into transition play with Wemby coming in as a trail. And we've seen that Wemby as a trail man in this preseason has just been like insane. Like when he comes running in there, whether he sets a screen or he just runs past everything and just puts his hand up, like he's able to do some pretty incredible stuff. So I think any creative way that they can get the ball moving and Wemby is moving against the grain of the defense, they're going to try to lean into that. And Fox is obviously like the guy for that.
Yeah, you mentioned Mitch Johnson, and that's another big storyline for this group. Greg Popovich, for the first time since 1997, will not be the coach of this team, and still a presence in the organization. But Mitch Johnson had to take over as an interim under difficult circumstances last year, as he now moves into his first full training camp. What are your impressions, both of him, just in terms of his leadership style, and then also some things that he may be trying to implement that we haven't seen as much from these guys in the past?
Well, one thing I'll tell you is I don't think Pop is going to have much of a role with the organization this year. I mean, maybe things will change. He is El Jefe technically, but he's been kind of in retirement from everything that I've seen. And I know that he showed up to camp last week or something like that. And it was a big deal for all the players that had gotten to play for him. But it sounds like they haven't really gotten to interact with him that much. Yeah. And so I think, and this is speculation just from watching what's going on and just hearing what everyone else that's much more familiar with the situation down here is. I think, obviously he's gone through a pretty massive health crisis and he's still in a recovery mode to a certain degree, whether he's just like slowing down and enjoying life and just trying to get all of his faculties back and just be comfortable, whatever it may be. But I don't get the impression that he's going to be an active part of advising the coaching staff, being there personally. Obviously, you can pick up a phone and, make phone calls and watch film from home. But like Mitch is running this team on his own, and they're giving him the space to do that from everything that I can tell. That certainly seems to be the case. And, last year, Mitch was trying to just kind of keep going what they had already built. And so this year he gets to really put a stamp on things. And, the core philosophies are the same thing that most people have been talking about for the last couple of years around the league. We're playing faster. We want everybody taking the ball up. And we've seen that a lot of the time. Wemby is either taking the ball up himself and he's pushing transition, or whoever gets the rebound is outletting to him and letting him run things. So that's a huge part of it. But they just want to get set as early as possible so that they can get Wemby cross-match as much as possible. And I think the interesting thing is going to be, what do they do if they can get Wemby cross-match? Do they bring him to the post where, his post-ups haven't been very good so far in the preseason? Do they just try to get him out on an island, or do they bring other people in the mix and see if they can draw a double towards him? I think ideally you're just trying to do whatever you can to try to draw a double towards Wemby while he's out in space, because he can pass over any double team in the NBA. The big thing you don't want is we're seeing like teams are doubling him when he gets to the post, and he tries to turn around and the guy gets a hand on the ball. He can't really do anything with it. So I think Mitch's task this year is just to try to build out all these different principles of how they play, so that when they're getting the ball to Wemby, he has the space and he's facing the basket, so he has the room to look around and make the right play. And that's mostly what he's been trying to do. And Wemby has been really committed to getting off the ball early, relocating, and just trying to kind of continue the play on. And that's what they really need to do, because the longer you can keep the play running, the more likely it is that Wemby's going to be able to touch the ball in a place where nobody can really do anything about it.
No, it's a great summation. And so we can move on to some of the decisions that Mitch Johnson is going to have to make in the rotation. We'll presume that Fox comes back within a week or two. So what's this starting lineup going to be, in your opinion, once Fox comes back? And if it is going to be something different than what you would like to do, please highlight that.
I don't know. I think it's going to be different than what I would do. Right now, okay, Fox is a lock, Castle's a lock, Wemby probably a lock. I think Harrison Barnes is a lock at the 4 probably. And then this is where it gets really tricky. You need another shooter. So I don't think Sohan would start once he gets healthy, even though he's been like one of their best players at times. And then you need someone who is just really good at filling the role as a floor spacer, who can then make good decisions off the bounce. And, Devin Vassell, that was kind of what he was looked at, I think, when he got to the league. He's turned into a more well-rounded player, but he's also been a little inconsistent. Julian Champagnie has been like the perfect complementary starter to this team full of playmakers. He is shooting lights out right now. He's pretty good off the bounce when people attack his closeouts. He's actually a solid rim finisher. He's a good defender. He's like 6'7"-ish. He's a good size. I think this is a case where you want to start a more, a less dynamic player, but somebody who fits that role more perfectly, and put him next to Harrison Barnes, who's also kind of a similar player, because you already have 3 really, really dynamic guards around, or playmakers around those guys. So I would actually start Champagnie, which I know would be difficult politically, where Devin Vassell certainly feels like he should be in the starting lineup, which is warranted. Keldon Johnson, who obviously will be in the mix. He's basically kind of like the captain or vice captain of the team. Effectively, he's kind of their vet there. He'll clearly be getting heavy minutes, but it's probably not going to be a starter at this point. So I would personally start Champagnie. I know that like a lot of people do their depth charts of the Spurs and they have him on the fringe. And I'm like, I don't know. If you watched him last year, you watch him so far in this preseason, he's like the perfect role player for a team like this. I think it's a no-brainer. You got to give him a big role.
No, I agree. He's been a Nate's guy for a while. He's been a Hollinger guy as well. And yeah, I mean, especially on a team that's been so starved of shooting during his tenure, and particularly because, I mean, he's not an elite shooter, but yeah, he's got more size and more defensive ability, more strength than your average shooting guard as well. So I agree. He kind of needs to have a big role simply because he can fit in any lineup, which it cannot be said for a lot of these guys. I mean, that would be shocking to me if Vassell doesn't start and you're bringing both Vassell and Dylan Harper off the bench eventually. But they got a lot of guys on this team all of a sudden. So let's say it is, as you say, it'll either Vassell or Champagnie. So, I mean, one of those guys has to start just from a shooting perspective. And then Barnes, I agree, it probably has to be him. Maybe he's not going to close. But, that's an interesting question, too. Like, they have Sohan, yet another non-shooter, right? The Sohan Fox or Sohan Castle, maybe more accurately, combination is a pretty rough one for these guys. So maybe he comes off the bench. I mean, he's still a talented defender, and they don't really have another 4 unless they're going to go with Olynyk there. Maybe I guess that's Keldon Johnson. I mean, to me, like they have a lot of guys more than they've had in the past, where I think they really struggled filling out a rotation. Obviously, Luke Cornett is there now. Kelly Olynyk is still in this mix. Carter Bryant, they would love to get some time for, I'm sure, too, but another guy who really defends and can't shoot. So I think ultimately what that defaults to is like the shooters are just going to have to play, and Barnes is one of those guys who doesn't need the ball, but at least will knock down shots and execute defensively.
Yeah, they're a weird roster because they've got some of the best depth in the NBA of quality players. They've got like 10, 11 players that are rotation worthy, but they have so many guys that it's really hard to fit that whole puzzle together to fit what you would want. And, I look at like Cleveland. Cleveland is a good example last year of their offensive system they ran, that they're a team that could, do, I think, a lot of similar things where it's a lot of like collapsing space, lots of cutting, things of that nature. And the Spurs are built for that. And it's a good way to get around having lineups that don't have 4 shooters out there, which is what most teams are trying to do these days. So we could see some of that. I think obviously the difference is that was a very point guard led offense in Cleveland, while obviously they have the guard talent in San Antonio to do it that way. Wemby's going to be the fulcrum of your offense most of the time. So I am really curious to see, especially now that Vic is playing so effectively out on the perimeter and he's drawing so much attention out beyond the 3-point line. They could play these lineups where they have like only one other real threat to shoot around him. And I mean, they've kind of done a lot of that, especially because, I mean, Barnes hasn't been shooting that well so far in the preseason. He's been pretty much missed every three he's taken, but he's still
I mean, he's at an age where he may kind of just be done as a starting level player.
Maybe. I think he's probably still at that level, and he's so smart, and like they do need a very smart decision maker and savvy and experienced decision maker out there because they don't have that much experience out there. I mean, Fox is the only other guy in the top, I guess, like starter level rotation who has more than like 7 years of experience. So I think they're going to want Barnes out there most of the time starting games just because he's such a good decision maker and has such a good pulse. And he also knows how to play with Wemby really well. He spent a lot of time playing with Wemby, and they trained together during the summer. So I think part of it is like he's just one of those guys that will know how to space around Vic better than anybody. And that's, spacing. We're talking about shooting. The point of shooting is to have good spacing, and that's where I think Barnes is going to be valuable. But, maybe he can't play 32 minutes every single night anymore.
No, and I mean, they just, as much as I think they need to take a step forward and be a serious basketball team this year, like it still is about developing some of these guys for 2-3 years from now, and that's hopefully Carter Bryant will play. We don't really have time to get into him necessarily, which
he's pretty good.
Too bad because yeah, his defense is very, very interesting. Danny was really high on him in the draft. In terms of combinations, I've seen it some in the preseason with Wembanyama running pick and roll with Luke Cornett. How much are they going to go to that too big look, you think?
Well, listen, when you get a nickname like French Vanilla for a lineup, it would be sacrilegious not to roll with it.
God.
Yeah, which Luke loves that nickname. I made sure to go straight to him when I found out about that. He was very, I think he gave it 5 stars and 2 thumbs up. He loves it. Listen, man, it's the tallest pick and roll combination in the history of the world. You got a 7'5" guy and a 7'2" guy running pick and roll. And it's worked out really well because Cornett, to his credit, as someone who's covered almost his entire career when I was in Boston, he is like turned into one of the best screeners in the NBA now. He's really, really good. And it's funny because we traditionally think of a great screener as like someone like Steven Adams, who's like a brick wall that just like people bounce off of him. And Luke doesn't do that. Luke, his whole thing is he has great touch on how to mix up his types of screens, and his releases on the rolls are so good, and he's a very good decision maker on the roll. And so they're able to do a lot of like kind of like dribble handoffs from Luke to Wemby, where in the first game they ran an action where Wemby was cutting out of the corner, coming around a screen for a handoff from Cornett. And I'm just like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. It was insane to watch. But they actually have a pretty good chemistry, and we're seeing Cornett has a good chemistry running pick and roll with a lot of their guys. And that's something that they haven't had in a very long time. And so I think Cornett's going to take on a pretty important role because, like, I mean, with all due respect to Zach Collins, I don't know him personally. Like, I've heard so many people complain about how bad their backup big situation has been since Wemby got there.
Yeah, he really struggled. He's actually been better in Chicago, but yeah, he was awful for them.
That's good. Yeah, but it was people were talking about it like it's a war story. Like, oh, we got through the backup big situation, and there's a lot of excitement about Cornett just not only spelling Wembanyama and being able to get out there with the second unit with Harper and run, but like we've seen some really interesting stuff that him and Wemby could do together. And just having somebody that can get Wemby the ball and then they're the roller that's drawing people into the paint, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't ever happen in any other scenario. And that's going to be really interesting for opening up Wembanyama's playmaking ability, where like we see him take threes, but we don't really ever see him like a real wing come over a pick and roll and pull up for 3. And if he can start doing that, like that's going to just make him so dangerous.
Well, and for a while, early in Wembanyama's career, they were playing with it with Collins, but the problem was Collins wasn't actually any good. And I think the strategies have evolved as far as playing 2 bigs together since then. And part of the reason I like that combo is that I kind of like it more offensively maybe than defensively, because I do want Wembanyama as close to the paint as possible. Like that was one of the big criticisms I had, was he's just like defending wings on the perimeter, which yeah, he can do, but also, he's the best pure shot blocker in NBA history probably. So, but the reason I like it is whether you have a center out there or not, you're always going to be guarding Wembanyama with probably a power forward and someone who's going to try to get into him a little bit, deny him, make his catches hard, all that stuff. And like, you're never going to guard him with your center, even if he is the only big on the floor. So but yeah, okay, so let's say your center is on Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes isn't really that threatening as a screener to where you're going to get the center to switch on to Wembanyama. If it's Luke Cornett setting the screen and then rolling to the basket, now you're actually putting that center into difficulty where he's either got to switch onto Wembanyama is going to get open, and a conventional pick and roll, Wembanyama can get downhill. He can actually, as you mentioned, throw that pass over the top to Cornett. There's been some nice little highlights of that in the preseason. So I think I do kind of like them exploring that. The problem is just there aren't enough really minutes to go around, right? If you're going to play Cornett and Wembanyama together, now are you playing Cornett over 25 minutes a game? Like that hasn't really been something that he's done in his career. Wembanyama, they probably can keep him in the low 30s at most. So I think they're just, and then, or you have you're going to play Kelly Olynyk or Bismack Biyombo more than they should. So, or Sohan at center, which always hasn't worked for them. So I think I like it, but it's also just the nature of the roster is I don't know how much they can do that together. Any other rotational stuff that's of interest to you here?
Well, and I think the key here, like, yeah, Luke plays like 20 a night. That's kind of his thing.
Yeah.
They have so many guys. It's hard to even play guys 25 minutes. Like I'm so curious to see, is Mitch going to play a 10-man rotation? Because I don't know. If we really want to go through the numbers, it's like there's going to be someone who's a very good rotation player who would be a 6-man on a lot of other teams who basically won't get in the game unless Mitch is going to go 10 deep every single night. And Kelly Olynyk was someone that they talked about a lot because he shot lights out was he in Toronto or New Orleans last year? Or probably played for the entire NBA last year. Like, I don't see how Olynyk gets minutes on this team. I think he's a 3-point specialist right now that's just out there when they really, really just want someone to stand at the top of the arc and space out, because there's just too many other guys that are good and that are very versatile players. And so I think the way you earn minutes on this team is that you just show that you can fit into so many different ways, because I think the big thing that Wemby is such a layered story. The story of who he is and where he's going as a person, as a basketball player, it's so layered and it's so mysterious. And that's always been the Spurs way. And what's so interesting about him is we don't know what player he's going to become. It seems like he's going to become something that we haven't quite seen before. And that makes sense. We haven't quite seen anything like him before. I guess maybe this is what it was like to watch Wilt Chamberlain back in the day. But his teammates don't even know what he's doing right now. Like, I've had multiple players tell me when he starts doing something, we don't really know exactly what he's going to do. And we're just trying to figure out how do we position ourselves so that eventually he's probably going to pass it to us. And the big thing he's been doing in the preseason is he has been passing at an obnoxious rate, especially those first couple of games where all the point guards were out. They were like, Jordan McLaughlin has been out too. So they were missing like 4 point guards, which I didn't even know was like physically possible. And so he had to run a lot of point. He was passing to the point that I was like, I think Wemby is too unselfish. I wish he was more of a jerk because this is actually kind of ridiculous. And so, and the point of it was that he was just trying to see, what is it like if I pass every single time? I just want to learn how to make every type of pass. And now that he has to kind of find a balance there of being a playmaker and, hunting his own shot, because Wemby can't get too passive because he also can score over anybody in the world. Once he figures out that balance and they start to figure out, how do we actually space around this guy? What is he really looking for? Like, they don't even really know. So as good as it looks right now in the preseason, where it's like kind of mess, but it's still working and they're winning, like, they're going to get a lot better as the season goes on. And that's what gives me hope for this team, that they actually have a chance to make the postseason in this very stacked Western Conference, because what we're seeing right now, we can't project this as it's kind of going to get better, or this is who they are. Are they good enough to make it right now? I really do think that they aren't playing that well together and don't have that much chemistry right now, and they're going to get it as the year goes on. And so as good as it looks now, where it looks solid, I think it's going to look a lot better 3 or 4 months from now.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it's going to happen, especially because this is a roster that has so many talented but perhaps ill-fitting pieces, at least at this point in time.
Definitely.
What do you think the crunch time lineup should be? Like, if you're trying to win a game right now, you're Mitch Johnson. What are you going to throw out there?
Well, based on what we've seen so far, David Jones Garcia is the first pick, obviously.
He's been playing every fourth quarter. Yeah,
he's been killing it. The fans
I actually
love him.
Kind of like Jones Garcia, but
he's fun.
No path on this team at all.
He's fun. Yeah, he's the guy that gets in there once every 3 weeks and has 10 points in 5 minutes, and fans are like, "See, he needs to be starting." Trade Fox. Okay, so Fox, Wemby.
Indeed.
I don't know, man. I don't know. They have 8 guys that could play. I think that.
Yeah, I think Vassell. I think Vassell has.
I think Vassell. I agree.
Yeah.
I think Vassell's either closing games or he's getting traded. He's making a lot of money. They have so much redundancy around him on the roster, so they either are closing games with him or they feel like, you know what, I think we need to move on. Because I mean, if I'm Vassell and I'm as good as he is and he's not getting those opportunities, I mean, I'd imagine that he wants to go somewhere else at that point. And he is good enough, I think, that he still probably has trade value. So I could see another team being like, this guy is going to make a huge difference on our team. Let's go get him. And the Spurs are like, you give us a good offer, we'll do it because we already have Champagny and we have Keldon Johnson and we have Sohan and Harrison Barnes. So I think Barnes will close a lot of the time because, again, they just need a reliable corner 3-point shooter. They need a really savvy player that can handle the pressure of crunch time. And, Champagny's only 24. He hasn't played in a ton of high-pressure situations. So I could see Barnes getting that nod over him at that point. And then the fourth spot there is a complete wild card. They legit have 4 guys that could finish. And I think it's going to be a blank check or blank slot every single night. And it's just who has it going that night, who makes sense matchup-wise.
Yeah, it's just going to be so fascinating to see what they actually think wins them games, whether they're like, nope, Castle is part of the future. He's got to close. I mean, maybe his shot gets good enough that I'll be agreeing that he should be in the closing lineup. Or maybe
I should clarify. Castle will close. I was thinking the Vassell spot there. I think Vassell is the clubhouse leader on that, but it could be anybody. But no, Castle was so good in the second half last year. I think he's clearly a lock to close and start.
Yeah, no, I mean that's I think he's one of the most overrated players in basketball right now. I didn't even think he should have won Rookie of the Year, and his shooting was really bad. He gives you a place to just hide your center when you're playing against Wembanyama, which I think is a big problem. So yeah, I mean, maybe he gets a lot better this year. Obviously, his dribbling ability was a positive. His ability to get to the basket and finish, and I don't think he's a disrupted defender, but he's a solid on-ball guy. And he'll probably just need to be out there because they'll need that guy. Carter Bryant's not going to be ready. Vassell is too skinny. So, I think he'll be out there to guard the opponent's best player, maybe even more so defensively than for whatever he's bringing on offense. But he's going to get guarded by the center this year. Whoever they start, unless they're going to start Sohan too, they're going to put their center on him. I think in almost all circumstances, and Spurs will have to deal with that. He'll have to get better as a screener and roller as well. How is Fox going to deal with just, having a center hanging out in the paint when getting to the basket is his best thing. And that's the other thing too. I just want to see whether Fox is going to rediscover some of his mid-range game, which is going to be important for this group. But I don't know. I mean, Harper, I think he's going to play really well. I think there are going to be times when I'd like to see. I think what Mitch is going to do probably is just hey, if you're playing well, we're going to throw you out there and kind of fit be damned would be my guess. I also just don't really know if these guys understand what a modern fitted team is in terms of fitting together and bringing all the pieces. Maybe that's more a management thing than a Mitch Johnson thing. And Mitch then, is going to hamstrung by the politics of it all, but all these dynamics are going to be fascinating as they are trying to take the next step, but also develop these guys. And so to what extent are each of those going to be prioritized, I think can determine a lot of their season. And of course, what the actual development is as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the development year. Look at the top of the West. Look at how far they are. They have so many guys. Most of their guys are still in their early development track or mid-career development track. So they have a lot of guys they're figuring out. And we're talking about Fox as if he's a guarantee, or I don't know, but like we can't underscore enough. He's out with a hamstring strain, I guess. Uh, Hamstring strains for guys that are very explosive are very problematic, especially with this uptick of Achilles injuries lately. We don't want any sort of issues in the mechanical change of any guy that's doing explosive movements. Like that's a huge, huge risk factor. And so, I've seen him getting in work at the facility. He looks like he's fine. I'm not seeing any concerns there, but obviously you can only glean so much from seeing that. But, and they expect him to be ready within probably the first week or so of the season. So he's not going to miss that much time, but it's just like, you don't want to come into the season with a hamstring strain if you're a guy like Darren Fox. And so, it's Steph Castle, he banged his knees and had a bruised knee. And so he missed a little bit of time, and, that healed. It's probably fine, but you never know. That could be an issue. They just had Lindy Waters. We just found this out right as practice ended. He's having laser surgery on his eye, or procedure, I was told. It's a mild procedure, but some sort of laser thing on his eye. I don't know if it's a LASIK or something like that, but he had some sort of issue with his eye. Maybe it's a corneal abrasion or one of those kind of things, but we don't know exactly. And so, he's been shooting the ball pretty well, and he's been showing like he could be somebody that even fights for minutes on this team. And now he has something. So like half their roster has been hurt throughout the preseason, and so they haven't been able to get game time. So it's going to take a while for this team to gel because they're not playing together. And every year we get to the season, we're like, this team's great on paper, they're going to be good, this team's going to be good. Every year, two of the teams that you think are going to have really good years, everybody gets hurt. One of them's New Orleans. That happens every year. But like, you're gonna, and I hope for God's sake that they actually have a healthy season. I want to see that for once in my life. But like, there's going to be teams that their seasons are going to be ruined by injury. And what's good for the Spurs is as long as Wemby's out there, their season's not ruined, and they could make the postseason. But like, they're the team in the NBA that's injuries are rocking them early, and there's a ton of them.
Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this group. They did, when Wemby was on the floor last year, they really avoided fouling, and I think that's going to be the case. But even if they play him with Cornette, even more, like teams are just not going to be able to get close enough to the basket that they're going to get fouled. I mean, I think actually the Spurs, especially with some of their depth on the perimeter and some of these young guys, might benefit by fouling more and pressuring more, because they also just didn't really force turnovers last year. I think that's somewhere where if they're going to be an elite defense, I think they need to get better there. But I think, they don't necessarily have that one just amazing wing stopper, because Carter Bryant is probably not going to play for them. So I think they're a little bit limited there. We talked about just the lack of two-way players, the lack of spacing. You can stop me on any of these if you disagree.
No, you're right.
But I know we only have about 10 minutes left here. So, so I think, defensively, that's kind of how it's going to look. I think getting Cornette was huge, just to not totally hemorrhage points. Like, they were positive net rating 2.5 when Wembanyama was on the floor last year, -6 when he was off. So, and that's in the games that he played. That's before even he went down. So, hopefully Cornette can get them closer to neutral there. They have plenty of dribbling, plenty of passing on this team, probably more than they need. And then of course, the shooting and spacing is not going to be great. Turning the ball over, I think they'll probably be average there. Maybe a little bit worse because they just have so many guys who are trying to get into the paint. Wembanyama could be a high turnover guy. And they haven't been great at getting to the foul line either. Maybe Fox can help them there. Maybe Castle and Harper can be better.
And Wemby.
Yeah. You talked about it, how he's getting better at getting to the foul line too, which was not really a forte for him. So ultimately, I still think these guys are going to be a below average offense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say I think it's going to be right around there. They're going to be a transition heavy offense. I mean, their whole thing is high defensive pressure, turnovers, racing off of rebounds, and just trying to get to quick actions. Like that's their whole thing because of all the spacing concerns and because they have so many dynamic playmakers. So lean into speed, emulate Indiana's, tempo that they played with last year, and we see it every year. Teams make the finals and the rest of the NBA tries to copy them. And I think the Pacers are a pretty clear template for how they should be trying to think this year.
Yeah. The other thing too is if they are going to overperform on offense, I think there's a couple ways they could do it. I mean, number one would be that Wembanyama still moves into this crazy spacing role. Now they're trying to give him the ball more, but they may realize that that's just kind of not working because they have all these other guys who need the ball and can't space. So maybe he just needs to be, he'll still be involved in the action, but maybe it's just going to be a lot more pick and pop. And I thought, when he was out there last year and shooting 9 threes per 36, I don't think that's where he's the most powerful. And it's a frustration that they can't open up the floor for him more. But his shooting ability and ability to handle the ball can kind of save the rest of these guys who can't shoot. So maybe that ends up making their offense kind of average there. I think when he's off the floor, I don't know how that's going to look. I mean, like Darren Fox, they are going to try to get more in transition with him. Like, he can be a really good offensive player. Is he an all-star? Like that again? I think that combination is good. It's just kind of the pieces around it. But I have him like kind of 19th, 20th, kind of similar to like a Dallas level of offense. I think those teams kind of have some things in common. And then I think really defense is going to determine whether they're truly threatening for a playoff spot or not. Like, if these guys are going to be top 5, then then we are talking about a team that's really, really good. I have them kind of more, 9-10 type of range because I don't know if they're going to force that many turnovers. I don't know if they're going to be like great on the glass necessarily, but I expect them to defend at a top 5 level when Wembanyama's out there, and it's really more about what happens when he's out.
I'm so curious to see De'Aaron Fox on defense because he was good when he got to the league. We see a lot of these guys that are like animals in college to get to the league. They play really intense defense, and then they become bigger stars.
He took steps forward under Mike Brown, too. I thought he actually was pretty decent the last couple of years in Sacramento.
Yeah, and, in theory, when you're playing with Vic behind you, the idea would be go really, really hard sending the ball over a screen and dare them to take a pull-up, too, because they're not taking anything inside of 20 feet when Vic's out there. So I'm really curious to see, is he going to be an absolute dog out there? Because Harper obviously is great with like high pressure stuff. I don't know about like his feel and whether he'll foul out in 5 minutes if they have him actual pressing, but like he's really good at that. Castle is a solid, pretty solid defender. He's 6'5", 6'6". He's pretty strong. But like Fox is that guy that can be like the super agile point of attack hound that can get them just like a bunch of free fast break buckets. And I'm really curious to see how much they try to go all out with their pressure on ball screens, whether they try to force teams to set screens 30 feet out instead of 25 feet out, and how that adjusts Vic's positioning out there, and just how much free range is Vic going to have. And, Luke Cornett actually made an interesting point where he was saying that when he's out there, he actually guards up on screens more for the first time in his career because Vic is behind him. And, Cornett was always in like a deep drop when he was in Boston. And I think that was a clear sign that they're going to try to get up on screens as much as possible, whether they're switching. They might even have like Harrison Barnes doing some like up to touch drop coverage just to like kind of like keep the team from switching. And it just like, it doesn't matter if Barnes doesn't know how to guard pick and roll, because even if he screws up letting the roll man go by, what's the guy going to do? Shoot over Wemby? So like they have an opportunity here to get super aggressive at the point of attack and even like pressing up on shooters off the ball in a way that teams never really quite have because of the way that Wemby defends the floor.
Yeah, again, like the fact that Wembanyama was Defensive Player of the Year last year to me, and probably everybody before he got hurt, when he still is just, I would say, not scratching the surface, but hasn't particularly gotten very deep in terms of his execution and understanding, I think is pretty remarkable. And yeah, that's, I am a little more positive on these guys than I was to start with talking to you. I'm going to go with 41 wins for this group. I think they are going to be trying, it just a lot of, and I think Wembanyama is just that good. Now, in games he misses, then what does it look like, particularly on offense? That's going to be a big question for me. I still think, though, these pieces just are not going to quite fit together that well. But they could be this year's version of last year's Rockets very easily too. Like, I mean, this is a team that has a lot of variability. Like, they could win 50 games this year just because Victor Wembanyama is that good, and the defense is top 3 in the NBA, and they managed to get by on offense with the transition. And Fox gets back to his form in 23. Like, there are ways it could happen. Castle takes a step forward and he's not killing them from a spacing perspective the way I expect. So I definitely think these guys could all of a sudden just be like, oh yeah, they're actually a top 4 seed this year. Like, that absolutely could happen. Like, they have, like, Fox and Wembanyama are like 2 all NBA level of talents, even if the supporting pieces are not that great. But I think it's going to be another year of discovery. It's a good thing they got Harper, but that's going to kind of set them back from a mindset standpoint, and probably should. So that's where I'm going to be. 41 wins for this group. What's your thought?
I was going to do 42. We're in the same ballpark. I think the range is the more interesting question here, not the actual number, because it's like, who knows? I think the range is like up to 51 wins or so and down to 38 wins. And that's assuming Wemby doesn't have another blood clot or whatever, like that he plays pretty much the whole year. But I do expect there to be load management for Wemby. I'd be surprised if we played over 70 games. Although I don't know, because I was thinking I'm used to covering a team that plays into May and June every year. So, I think the Spurs realistically know that even if they make it out of the play-in, getting out of the first round against whoever they would face is going to be very, very difficult. So maybe they just push Wemby and don't worry about saving Wemby for a theoretical postseason run. But I would imagine he's going to have to sit. Like, there's no way that his wind is going to be that good coming off of recovery from the DVT, even if he did spend a ton of time training this offseason. We just see it. Like, these guys need time to work their way in. I have no idea if his TVT diagnosis means that he needs other load management throughout the season to prevent inflammation that could lead to another risk of clotting or whatever. Because remember, guys can't play on blood thinners. So I presume he's not on blood thinners right now, which means that the risk is back and he's predisposed to risk, I assume, because he had one already. So they probably have to do certain things for load management to manage his inflation. If he has any sort of upper body injury where it could potentially cause a clot in this area, like, they have to then probably rest him or load manage him. And I'm just speculating just based on a rudimentary knowledge of how these things work. But, like, that makes sense, right? It seems reasonable.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that it's not going to be an issue with what we see, like Brandon Ingram, for example, hasn't had this again. It wasn't. It seems like something that's more kind of physiological due to he's never really become clean on whether he had a procedure or not to open up that shoulder area where the clot was. But that's my hope, is that it's just this is a one-off thing. That's been the history with this specific kind of clot. So I'm not factoring that in necessarily. It's more just he's 7'5" and he's gonna need to they're gonna have to take care of him for the long haul.
Yeah, and just so listeners know, because this is something people probably generally don't know, he had a blood clot in the collarbone area. This happens to people sometimes where the pressure of the collarbone can cause like a wound that then clots, and then it gives you a deep vein thrombosis, blood clot. And so they'll do a little procedure to kind of like, I guess, remove some bone or reposition bone or something like that to give that area less pinching so it doesn't form a clot.
Yeah.
That's basically it. So it's not that complicated or like high risk of a procedure. So, but yeah, I mean, like these guys, their ceiling is pretty high. Rockets was a good example. I think the Pistons, what they did last year, being able to get to a mid-40s team and like competitive enough to make a first round series difficult, but not make it out the first round, it's probably the more reasonable high end expectation for San Antonio. Frankly, if the West wasn't so, if the league wasn't so lopsided towards the West right now, I would look at them as like a pretty solid playoff team. Like they'd be in the running for the 4th seed or 5th seed if they were in the Eastern Conference right now. They're a good team. Like they are a team that you look at as a clear first round level team, kind of like entry level first round team, kind of like what OKC was a few years ago. And I don't think they're going to take a giant leap the way that OKC did, where they went from like, first round team to conference finals team to champion. I don't think it's going to go quite that smoothly, but that is kind of the path that they're on right now.
All right. Well, where can we keep up with all your work throughout this season?
Just listen to this podcast over and over and over again so you can hear how right Nate and I were. Or go to The Athletic, one of those two.
Yeah, it's going to be fast because they were actually 8th last year in 3-point attempt rate. And Wembanyama was a big part of that. But I want to see if that's going to continue. Like if they could duplicate that again, I may just be wrong, and these guys are going to be awesome. And we could very easily be talking about Victor Wembanyama as like clearly the third best player in the league after this.
And maybe Steph Castle has a Jaden Ivey and he's suddenly shooting 40% from 3 on 6 attempts this year. And if that happens, that's like a 50-win team right there. If that happens right there.
Yeah, no, it is. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Our season outlook series is now complete. If you want to listen to all of them, please sign up for Dunc'd on Prime. We are using the code Preseason25 to give you 35% off a yearly membership, which is already heavily discounted off of the monthly price. Link to that is in the show notes.
Wait,
and
the code isn't cap space?
I'm sorry?
The code isn't cap space? What has happened to this show? God, I remember back in the day when Dunc'd On was dunked on.
That's for all the ads is cap space. Yeah.
I only use one promo code with Dunc'd On. It's cap space.
Preseason 25 is the code for you guys. That link is in the show notes too, in case I fucked it up. But Danny, I will be back to give our opinions on the league as a whole going into the season in a couple of days. Talk to you all then.